Clara sat in the corner of her cramped apartment, the only light coming from the flickering glow of her laptop screen. The walls around her were plastered with old posters of long-forgotten bands and quotes she had once found inspiring but now looked more like reminders of a life she had failed to live. The floor was cluttered with papers, unfinished projects, unread books, scribbled notes that seemed to mock her attempts at starting something, anything meaningful. Her mind was a blur. She stared at the screen in front of her, but the words on the document were illegible, swimming in a sea of indecision. The cursor blinked endlessly, a cruel reminder of the work that needed to be done but felt insurmountable. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Kelly, her best friend. "Girl, you're so behind. When are you going to get your life together? You can't just sit there all day." Clara sighed, her chest tightening. She tossed the phone aside, but it wasn't long before it buzzed again. This time, it was her cousin, asking why she hadn't yet achieved everything everyone seemed to think she should. And another message from a colleague, critical and demanding. Each buzz felt like a jab, each message a reminder that the world expected more from her than she could give. Clara had grown up surrounded by these voices. They were her family, her friends, the people she worked with. But now, their words felt suffocating. Their criticisms, once manageable, had become the air she breathed, heavy, thick, and impossible to escape. It was as though she was drowning in their expectations. The relentless weight of everyone's opinions was starting to take its toll. Clara had once been full of dreams of building a business, writing a novel, traveling the world, but those dreams seemed so far away now. Every time she made the smallest effort to move forward, it felt as though someone was pulling her back, dragging her into the quicksand of self-doubt. One afternoon, after reading yet another message from her mother, her heart sank even further. "Why aren't you married yet? What are you doing with your life? You're wasting it." Clara stared at the screen, the words blurring in front of her eyes as tears welled up. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to explain how stuck she felt, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply let her phone slip from her grasp, staring blankly at the floor. Her thoughts were a tangled mess. She would try to focus on a new project, but the moment she sat down to work, she heard those voices from her past, from people who had always told her what she couldn't do. "You're not good enough," they whispered. "Who do you think you are?" Clara was trapped. The noise in her head grew louder, drowning out any chance of clarity. It was as if the very air around her was filled with negativity, and every attempt to move forward was met with resistance. She felt lost in a never-ending cycle of fear, doubt, and disappointment. One evening, after days of feeling suffocated by the weight of everyone's opinions, Clara decided she needed to escape, if only for a moment. She put on her jacket and stepped outside, not really knowing where she was going. She walked aimlessly through the dimly lit streets, her mind swirling with the same worries that had consumed her for weeks. Then, as if by chance, she came across an old bookstore tucked away on a quiet corner. The sign outside was worn, the windows covered in dust, but there was something about the place that pulled her in. Without thinking, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The musty smell of old paper and leather greeted her. The aisles were narrow, crammed with shelves that seemed to go on forever, filled with forgotten books. Clara wandered through the aisles, picking up random books and flipping through them, but nothing seemed to catch her interest. That is, until she spotted one book, its worn cover standing out against the others. Mindset: The New Psychology of Success by Carol S. Dweck. Clara pulled the book off the shelf and started flipping through the pages, her eyes scanning the words as if they were speaking directly to her. The more she read, the more a sense of clarity began to wash over her. The idea of growth mindset resonated deeply with her. It was a concept she had never considered before. Growth versus fixed mindset. The idea that your abilities weren't set in stone, that failure wasn't something to fear but something to learn from. That night, Clara stayed up reading the book, consumed by its message. For the first time in a long time, something inside her clicked. All the noise from her past, the negativity, the doubt, the criticism, was just that, noise. It didn't define her. She had the power to change her reality. The next morning, Clara woke up with a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in years. The haze of negativity had lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of determination. She grabbed her phone, went through her messages, and deleted the ones that drained her energy. She didn't need the toxic influence of others any longer. Clara made a conscious decision to disconnect from the people who had been pulling her down. She blocked the numbers of those who were constantly reminding her of her failures and limitations. For the first time in years, she felt free. She dove headfirst into learning, seeking knowledge from every source she could find. She watched YouTube videos on personal development, listened to podcasts on entrepreneurship, and read countless articles on business and mindset. The more she learned, the more she realized how much power she had over her own life. The skills and knowledge she needed were available to her, if she was willing to put in the work. Her first step was small. Clara began selling handmade jewelry online, a hobby she had always enjoyed but never considered as a business. At first, sales were slow. There were moments when she wanted to give up, when the self-doubt crept back in. But she remembered the lessons from the book: failure was just a part of the process, not the end. Each setback was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to improve. As months passed, Clara's business began to take off. Slowly but surely, she built an online presence, gained a loyal following, and started seeing consistent sales. But more importantly, she began to feel a sense of pride in herself. She was creating something from nothing, learning new skills, and proving to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. Her confidence grew with each step forward. She realized that her success wasn't just about the business, it was about the transformation she had undergone. She had shifted her mindset. The voices of doubt, the toxic relationships, the negative influences, they no longer had power over her. Clara had learned to take control of her thoughts and actions, to surround herself with people who inspired and supported her. One quiet morning, as Clara stood in front of her mirror, she saw a different person staring back at her. She had changed. The chaos in her mind had quieted. The doubts, once so loud and overwhelming, had become whispers she could easily ignore. She had built her own empire, one based not just on business, but on personal growth, self-belief, and resilience. Clara knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, failures, and setbacks. But she no longer feared them. She understood that growth came from facing those challenges head-on and learning from them. She had found her power, and she was determined to continue growing, thriving, and creating the life she deserved. Looking back at the life she had left behind, the negativity, the toxic relationships, the doubts, Clara realized that they had been the catalyst for her transformation. Without them, she might never have found the strength to change. And with that realization, Clara smiled. She was free.